notice?
Yes.
Thank you, Joyce. We'll move right on to possible action items. The 2020-2021 budget. Can I have a move to approve the 2020-2021 budget as presented?
I had a question about something.
Jared was going to
I'll
give a
ask
brief,
it after the motion. I'll ask. Go ahead.
yeah, Jared was going to give a brief report, but it looks like his audio's having a little bit of a issue.
Oh, that's why I couldn't see it. Okay.
All right, is that better?
There you go.
There
Yeah,
you go. Go
better
ahead
is
and explain.
No problem. First of all, let me apologize. You know, obviously we don't go anywhere, so I don't know how I ended up getting strep throat, but so I'm on the hopefully under medicine now, so I might not talk as long as I normally do because my throat's pretty sore. But there are two documents attached. At least it's not COVID. I've tested for that. We're all good. There are two documents that are attached. One is the revenue limits, the final one that will help us set our levy and mill rates. And then there's the 2021 budget adoption, which is pretty similar to something that you've already seen before at the annual meeting with the preliminary budgets. And those have 3 columns with the different funds. The first column will sort of give you a description of what it was, but when you get into the number side of it, that would be the 2018-19 audited numbers, and then 2019-20 it's still unaudited, even though the auditors have performed the audit. They're still working through some of the tying out everything, which we will get closer to in December, and then they'll issue a final report in January that we'll share with the board. And then there's the last column, which is the budget 2021. And so there are just a couple of high level things that I want to walk through before you approve the budgets. So overall, when we look at enrollment for the purposes of revenue limits, this year we're at 3,089 FTE. And just as a reminder, that does not represent kids in seats because we can only count for our revenue limits of residents that are not only attending our district, but students that are open enrolled out of our district. Our 4K kiddos count as a 0.660 FTE, where kids kindergarten through 12th grade count as a full FTE. And then in addition to that, we have our 3-year rolling average. So the 3,089 FTEs, which is 62 FTEs less than we had last year, or 75 less than what we were basing it on, pre-COVID when we were starting to develop our budget, which then actually resulted in a loss of revenue of about $227,000. And then when we add on waiving of student fees and just some of those other fees that happen through when we have normal school, we're projecting an overall revenue decrease of $300,000. So ultimately our revenue would have been higher by $300,000. We did see an increase in our open enrolled revenue into the district by $300,000, which obviously has helped make up that gap that we currently have with the $300,000 loss of revenue. However, that is less than what we were actually projecting. We could have saw an additional $200,000 due to the fact that not all the students that were offered seats necessarily showed up due to the fact that they might have chosen another school district, or some of them had pulled out because they felt that if there was virtual, they would just stay at their resident district. But we also did see an increase in our open enrollment out. So our residents have chosen to go to another school, and primarily those students did enroll to what I would classify as an established virtual school. Like we've, so currently we have about 111 students that have chosen to open enroll out, which is an increase over 88, which is typically our average numbers between 85 and 90, which that is an added an expenditure of about $180,000 that is to our budget. Our equalization aid increase over last year was by $934,000. And just as a reminder, that is not new revenue. So what that does is that when we run our revenue limits, that gives us our total amount of revenue that we can collect between property taxes and the state. And so what that does is that $934,000 just shifts the responsibility to the state instead of our taxpayers. And then ultimately our overall revenue budget, which drives our expenditures when we do a zero-based budgeting, is a growth of 1.12%, or about $496,000. Now, this is with all the information that we currently know. Obviously, there are conversations that are still happening around enrollment and how those membership numbers could potentially look, or even if there's going to be a budget repair bill. But right now, we're only seeing our revenues grow by 1.12%, which means that we need to make our expenditures fit within that 1.12% growth of our budget. When we start looking at our expenditures, I can tell you that when we built this budget, or when I put all the numbers together, we have to remember that this budget is not just a budget for this year. We're going to have effects of COVID-19 and the pandemic on our budget for a number of years. Part of that is because we're going to experience that enrollment loss for the next couple of years. The other part of it is that, yes, we did spend about $750,000 less than our budget last year, which was part of the reason that we received additional equalization aid. Not all that was savings due to COVID, but a majority, half of it was. But what that means is, as a negative aided district, for each dollar that we don't spend, we actually receive additional equalization aid. So when we do get back into a normal spending level, we're obviously going to spend, majority of our budgets. So we'll see a decrease, which then will have, push some of that burden back to our taxpayers. And so it's, sort of that perfect storm, as we're going to a referendum right now, and we're projecting a mill rate of an increase of $40 on that $100,000 property. We, obviously are building this. And so when we set our debt and we set our community service, we've added in some, early debt payments so that we can hopefully minimize some of those surprises next year and the year after. The other part of it is that the state budget will be a new biennium next year. So we're not for sure what will come out of that. But we do know that how the equalization aid formula works is that they take your number of resident students to your property value. Our property value as a district grew by 5.17%, and our residents decreased based on enrollment. Unless those residents happen to re-enroll by the second Friday, we will also see that go into the factor of what equalization aid might look like the following year. So in January, then they take their second Friday count. That's what will actually be part of the calculation for next year's equalization aid. So as this budget continues to be pretty fluid than in any past years, we continue to look at shifting expenditures around, and then the way that the budget is approved based on a function level. So if you look at the budget approval level under expenditures, we're approving budgets such as 110, which is undifferentiated curriculum, which means that incorporates all of our elementary, including supplies, equipment, in addition to staffing in those specific areas. And then when you get into like the 120,000s, 130,000s, that's when we started getting into our secondary. So when we start shifting money around, so for example, right now we know that there's not athletics that are happening. However, we haven't been able to take all that money and necessarily shift it to another area to cover, such as PPEs, because we're for sure what the spring is going to look like. The other part of it is that some of the savings that can be expected through teachers not buying supplies for home, actually, instead of us charging supply or student fees, we waived those this year, but our elementary schools are still sending supplies home to our students. So those budgeted amounts are still going to be there. We continue to run our HVAC system in occupy mode, even when students aren't there. So we're bringing in an additional outside air because we do have staff that are in the building. And then when we do bring back students, obviously we'll increase that as well. And so we don't perceive to have any utility savings. Like in the spring, we saw about a $47,000 savings in overall utilities. And that was a combination of not being in the buildings, plus also doing some energy efficiency things. But we're not going to see that. We're going to see, obviously, running HVAC systems more consistently to bring in that outside air. Our technology costs are higher this year. The reason that is we need to purchase additional equipment, additional software such as Canvas, as we're all aware of. But then we also look at hotspots for family. And so, for examples, we're anticipating an increase to our budget of approximately $100,000 for hotspots. So just in the month of September, and obviously that's when we were getting everybody up and going with hotspots, our initial bill was just shy of $20,000 for the month for hotspots. Obviously, that's a service that we need to provide our families so they have a quality virtual education. But those are expenditures that we're going to be pulling from other areas of the budget once things become a little more certain. As we prepare to bring back students potentially as early as, in January 25th, we also have to be looking at what does long-term sub cost look like? What does the additional cost for disinfectant wipes, disinfectant sprays, masks, shields, plexiglass, so we're ready for those students. And then in addition to that, being able to provide, additional types of storage containers. So things that we are purchasing right now at the elementary level are plastic totes. So when students do come, they put their individual stuff in there. So there's no more sharing of items. And so, the district is purchasing those items and getting it ready. So when we do are able to bring back students, we can do that. But then we also have additional staffing needs. And like I talked about, having potential long-term subs to cover staff that might have health concerns, that there might not be enough sections virtually for them to teach, and they do get to go on leave. And making the assumption that some of those individuals might have been with the district longer because of, their high risk, maybe due to their age, they probably have enough sick time that could potentially cover them. So not only would we be paying a long-term sub, but we would be paying that staff member as well. But additional cleaning crews, depending on the number of students that we can bring back at one time, being able to provide that additional cleaning, even though we've heard numerous times that cleaning might not be as important as it was, I think it still needs to be a number one priority. We don't want to be that school district or to contribute to the concept of, oh, now that is coming true and we weren't ready for that. In addition to that, additional nursing services to be able to provide that contact tracing or those other services that we have. And so currently, some of those items we're currently not purchasing. However, as we are planning, they have been embedded into the budget, and we've identified areas where we can pull that money to cover those areas. Such as transportation. We are aware that Nelson's is helping provide food delivery, but we're also not spending the amount of money that we typically would on transportation. Yes, we're paying Nelson's the contract, but when we redid their contract, we took out the fuel clause, which means the district pays 100% of the fuel. So if buses aren't running, we don't pay the fuel. So that was something that we were able to lower the contract amount for. So we are being able to be a little bit more reassured that the money that is being paid to Nelson is covering their equipment and paying their bus drivers. Right now, we believe based on our school nutrition participation rate, we won't have to supplement money from Fund 10 to move to Fund 50. In addition to that, they had a pretty healthy fund balance. So as of tonight, I feel comfortable that we won't necessarily overspend our $45 million budget that we're presenting. There might be additional areas of savings, such as if we end up not having 3 through 12 return and athletics are gone, there's going to be some additional savings that we haven't released yet because there are uncertain unknowns that we're unable to say yes, we can free up that money to put someplace else. So that's a quick overview. Are there any questions?
Peter?
Tell me about the fund balance.
So the fund balance is right now at just shy of $9 million. We added about $750,000 to that. That's a combination of some COVID savings. In addition to that, some expenditures that we did not necessarily receive by June 30th. And so as I remind everybody, the fund balance is not cash sitting in the bank for us. It technically is a point in time on June 30th of what we had expended physically and the invoices that we received. And that's where the auditors come into play. They're the ones that will tell us that if an expenditure happened in June and we don't get an invoice, if we're going to be able to code it back to June or not. And we work through that process. So we're definitely within our board range. We're a little higher than We obviously been in the last couple of years. Over the last couple of years, we've, teetered between a couple 100,000 in and then a couple 100,000 out, back and forth, which is pretty typical.
So what do you anticipate we'll do this year?
Well, if we stay on course as is and say we don't end up bringing any students back, I will tell you that we'll probably put some additional funds into fund balance. If we end up bringing back only 4K through second grade students, I do believe that we'll have some savings. What that savings looks like, I'm not for sure, just because we're not for sure what our staffing needs will necessarily look like until we start physically reopening. We are starting to, obviously athletics, there has been hardly anything that's been spent in athletics. If we end up canceling the whole season for everything for high school athletics, there's obviously, a larger amount of savings than I'm anticipating. But I don't want to say that we're saving all this money because there hasn't been a final decision made on what athletics will necessarily look like.
By the way, shouldn't there be a setting between full in the buildings for the HVAC, but somewhere between empty and unoccupied and occupied? If you only have one or a few small number of people, I don't know, can you get away with less airflow? That's less fresh air. That's the big issue, right?
Right. And I will tell you that I have directed our buildings and grounds to be on the more conservative side and err on the side of caution versus trying to, can we, change it a couple degree flows less so we can save a little bit of money. I'd rather our staff feel comfortable and knowing that there is additional fresh air that's coming in. And I can't speak specifically what that percentage looks like right now, but I can tell you that we are definitely increased compared to what the standards have been set for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think that those are, well, they depend on occupancy, and if the occupancy is less, then maybe there's some savings we could get there. Okay, I ask about the fund but balance because WASB is saying that the primary economic impacts or revenue impacts did not fall in last year and will fall in this year, and from COVID, and their advice is for us to conserve, the school districts to conserve cash, because they anticipate next year's, when the new biennium comes out, there are going to have to be some adjustments because the state revenue will be off. And so that's why I'm asking you about the fund balance. And it would be very nice to have an extra $1 million in there when we try to do this budget exercise next year.
Yep. And that's part of the comment of being able to look at this budget more than just 1 year. So even though we put $750,000 and we could have ran through some scenarios that said that we needed to use some of that 750, but we've obviously been very cautious about committing to anything above and beyond. We haven't committed to anything that are one-time expenditures because we're unsure what that might look like. Now, once January comes around and that budget process for the state begins, hopefully we'll have a better idea what that might look like, and then we can decide that. But I would definitely agree that we're probably going to have to rely on our fund balance to be able to cover some of those one-time expenditures if something goes away based on the state budget.
Yeah.
Susan Fox.
Well, I was just going to say that WSB in the legislative report they gave last night is also saying that it does not look likely that there will be any kind of hold harmless situation, that the legislators are not looking kindly on that in terms of lost enrollment due to the COVID stuff. So it's not likely that there'll be anything to mitigate against our having to roll those lower numbers forward. So that just one more example of how that'll be with us for a while, most likely.
All right. Peter?
I'm sorry, again, how many students did we lose? Have we lost? Or are we down?
So we are down 62 FTEs from last year.
Okay, so that's
75 from what we were projecting originally before March happened to us.
So that's $600,000 to $700,000, $700,000 of revenue that we're.
Well, right now we're down.
Will be a third of that this year.
Right, so we got a third of that. So which you're looking at
And if it lasts for if we get all those students back next year, for example, over 3 years, we will be down $600,000 to $700,000 averaged over totaled over the 3 years.
Right, we won't be back, yes.
Okay.
Quick math, that is correct.
Eric?
I just got a quick question, Jared, and it's just so, because I don't understand what it is. On 860 where it says compensation and fixed assets, can you just explain real briefly what that is for or from,
Yep.
where that's coming from?
So that is when the district sells things that cost more than $5,000.
Okay.
And so there's nothing budgeted because I don't plan to sell anything for more. But so last year we sold the Jerome Street houses, and that's where that 168. And the year before that, we sold the property along Damascus Trail.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. Thanks.
Okay. Is there any more questions, concerns? Okay, hearing none.
Have we had a motion?
No, we haven't had one.
I move approval of the 2020-21 budget as presented.
Second,
All right, any more questions? Hearing none, roll call vote. Susan Fox,
aye.
Susan Manning, Susan Manning, you're on mute.
We could read your lips.
Okay.
Good place to have me, right? Aye.
Elizabeth,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Andrew, aye. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Next is the 2020-2021 tax levy.
All right, so they're embedded into board docs is the tax levy is the top portion of the chart. And that shows you over the last 3 years. So in 2021, our total levy that would ask for us to approve is $30,322,170, which is a decrease of 0.21%. Realistically, when you look at what's happening here is you'll see that we're seeing a decrease in our general fund, and that's due to the fact that we received some additional generalization aid. In addition to that, our enrollments. Fund 38 is decreased, our debt service payment there. We do have a small increase in Fund 39, and that purposes is for two things, is to help do a prepayment of some debts, to also help potentially offset some artificial increases to our tax levy next year and the year after. Because if we do see a loss of equalization aid and we do see students coming back, there is a potential that we would see a larger spike in our mill rate and levy to our taxpayers. So that's why we're seeing that increase there. And then obviously our community service fund. So the last couple of years we've been using fund balance. And as we plan, we've exhausted majority of our fund balance there. And as we plan to potentially coming back, I need to ensure that we have funds in there to cover our expenditures. And Fund 80 is one of those areas that we can carry those revenues over to the next year. So if next year we find that we have an excess amount of money in fund balance, we would under levy in that area as well. So when we look at things, then at the bottom of this is the chart that is our mill rate. And so it breaks down by general funds. So overall, we're looking at a $12.47 mill rate. And when we look at that, our property tax or our property evaluations increased by 5.17, which I think is interesting because obviously it's pretty in line what we've seen in the last couple of years. So there was obviously no impact of COVID currently. So we might see that property valuation change next year. But when we talk about growth, the municipality that saw the largest increase in property value from last year to this year when we talk about equalization was the town of Cottage Grove. The village of Cottage Grove saw an increase of 4%, and the city of Monona was at 4.9. So our two largest municipalities was the town of Cottage Grove at an 8.51% and the city of Madison of a 7.19%. And this isn't the taking and reassessing. This means that when they run it through the equalization aid or the equalization value process, that there are more property that came online in these municipalities, and the fair market or the sale price of these houses have increased. So that was a driving factor. So what we're looking at right now is that by passing this total levy and with this mill rate, individuals, if we were to take a $200,000 house that was there last year and increase that property value by a 5.17%, they should actually see a small, $10 decrease in their taxes. Now, there's a lot of things that go into play, because obviously if they made some changes and their property went up more than 5% through the fair market value side of things, then there's obviously a chance that they could pay a little bit more. But overall, the mill rate is less than last year. And we only saw that, we saw a 5.17. So in the village of Cottage Grove, when they did that reassessment, the reassessment was to bring the ratio up to the fair market value, which they were tremendously lower in. So the village will, when they get their portion of the school taxes, then that will be distributed based on their assessed values.
Peter?
I noticed the community service fund, the budgeted levy is $650,000. The levy is $650,000, but the budgeted expenditures are $700,000. Why is there a discrepancy between those two numbers?
So the 650 is only for the tax purposes, and $50,000 is if we were to open our pool or collect fees. That other $50,000 would come from fees that are paid by patrons.
Okay.
Which
Right,
we
so
probably
that's not
won't
money,
achieve that
that's
$50,000, because at the rate we're going, it doesn't look. I mean, obviously we're trying to reopen the pool, but it won't be at the same level as it was before COVID. We obviously have run summer camps through Fund 80, and so depending on what that might look like this coming summer, as we enter what this summer might look like with COVID. But obviously we left it in there to hopefully have some hope.
But that $50,000 is not coming out of fund balance, or not intended to come out of fund balance.
No, not to come out of
any
fund
other streams.
Yes.
And you mentioned in the past that we had been spending fund balance on community service.
Yes.
Tell me about that a little bit.
So what we've taken out of Fund 80, obviously we have our school resource office, and so we've only, so we were at 385,000 in 2018-19, and I think we collected, I don't have it in front of me right now, we collected, I think, just shy of $80,000 or so in pool fees from swim lessons. Mm-hmm. However, we have added some additional expenditures from school resource officers, from going from 1 to 2. We have our communications portion of that. We've added the summer programs. Am I missing?
Yeah, how much have we been taking from fund balance to fund some of that stuff?
One second here.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just want to understand the numbers.
So back in 2018-19, our fund balance was at 471,000, and now we're at 272. So 19-20, we reduced that down by 200,000, and then last year we decreased it by another 5,000.
Oh, hang on. That's fund balance for this fund alone, right?
Yes.
So that's what you've been taking. You've been spending down the Fund 80 fund balance, not
yes. Yep. Sorry. So. Okay. Fund 80 has its own separate. So anything that we collect within Fund 80 or through either taxes or fees that are charged are set aside. They do not come out of Fund 10, and we have to balance that. So even it's not like Fund 27 or Fund 50. If we go negative, we have to make that up the following year through tax levy. We cannot pull that from Fund 10.
That begs a different question, which is, how did we build up a Fund 80 fund balance in the first place?
So we've built our swim program. I can tell you that when we really, our swim lessons are typically always full. We also have increased our participation of what we run through Fund 80 from having athletic summer camps. So before, our booster clubs were always running summer camps and helping pay for, or not helping pay, they were charging families all over the board. So, you know, football might have a booster club and their summer camp for kids was going to be $200. And so what we decided to do was bring that all under Fund 80 and have a consistent cost or consistent price for families and run that. And it's open to everybody. I can't speak specifically to why it got so high without looking into it, but I can tell you that that number has been there for the last couple or before 2018. And so we felt that having a couple of months worth of expenditures makes sense. But having a $471,000 balance was high. And obviously, if we look at previous tax levies, we weren't doing $600,000, $500,000. And over the last couple of years, we've also added, like I said, the second SRO. We have added the communication side of things. We've added more lifeguards, swim instructors at the pool. We obviously, depending on how long COVID goes, I know there's a couple of community organizations that are working with providing meals on the weekends. Fund 80 is another one of those areas where we can pull that money and help fund some of those things to open up food for the weekends. We haven't completely opened that door yet. Obviously, there were some conversations earlier on about being able to provide, you know, medical or testing things. Those are things that can continue to be explored. But to go back to your specific question, how did it get so high? I can't specifically answer that off the top of my head.
Okay. Is the pool, what percentage of its operating cost is the pool fund?
So that's what's unique about Fund 80 is that some of the operation costs, like utilities, can't be charged to Fund 80 because the pool is part of the high school. So the utilities have to be run through Fund 10 anyway. It's not divvied out. So what's divvied out for Fund 80 is literally our supervisor for aquatics, all the lifeguards, any type. We split the chemicals 40-60%. 40% can go to Fund 10, 60% can come to Fund 80. When we purchase equipment, some of those things can be shared between the two. One of the things that we've been able to continue to explore is, so even on the athletic side, since we have the summer camps, so when we are working on the summer camps and we're looking at what summer camps are going to be offered. So I'll just use volleyball. Obviously, when the volleyball is having their summer camps, they want to purchase some equipment for that summer camp that at the same time, the summer camp's happening in the summer, which then means you can use that equipment in the fall during volleyball. So it does help offset some of the expenditures in Fund 10. Obviously, there are very specific guidelines that we have to follow through DPI. So we buy, you know, new balls that are going to go to the athletic department. We can actually buy those through the summer program. The kids can use them and then they can become practice balls for the athletic department instead of buying brand new balls all the time. And we can rotate things through like that, or equipment to help with setting and basketball, just some of the things that come to my mind.
One last question. Can you tell me for certain that that cover is on the pool right now?
I cannot tell you that for certain. It better be.
It better be, yeah. Somebody check.
Susan Fox.
I just have a question, not really related to the levy directly, but last night, the other thing they talked about at WSB was this report that you have to file in November that really itemizes any savings or extra expenses related to COVID. And I'm just wondering if when at some point, if that could be shared with the board, just to give us since that's something we get asked all the time, why aren't you saving money? Or, you know, it would just be, if that's a shareable kind of thing, that'd be great to see at some point.
Sure, yeah. So today, Lisa Hype and myself, we just completed that information. Lisa's the one that submitted it, so I was able to provide it. I don't know what the method of the submitting it was.
Yeah, I don't know either. So, yeah,
but I think that definitely will become a public record. And so we'll definitely be able to share that with board members as well.
Thanks.
Okay. Any more questions, concerns? Okay, Peter?
I would move approval of the 2020-2021 tax levy as presented.
Second.
All right, any more discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Peter,
Aye.
Susan Manning,
Aye.
Susan Fox. I think she froze.
If that was
Oh.
me, I.
Okay. Eric,
Aye.
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Lorraine,
Aye.
Andrew, aye. Ayes have it, motion carries. Next
Thank
up
you.
is the suspend policy 0131.1 bylaws and policies.
Okay, so the following item is a recommendation from our policy committee to revise our policy on public participation at board meetings. And because it's being impacted currently because of, holding or, attending virtually and so on, the recommendation is to consider this revision in one meeting. Your current policy requires 2 readings to revise a policy. And so if you want to approve the changes tonight, you need to vote to suspend your own policy, temporarily, just for the purpose of reconsidering policy 167.3.
Okay,
So do people have any questions about what the policy changes? I mean, we're kind of combining these next 2 things together, because if we suspend the policy, the purpose is to deal with item 4, which is really this policy. And the main thing was, we talked about the fact that during these virtual meetings, rather than having us read the letters, it would be really nice if people could be on Zoom and read and make their own comments. And that way we don't have the issue of when they have 10 minutes worth, asking them to be more concise. We can also ask them some clarifying questions. Like you had a correction, Peter, at the last one, and the person wasn't there, and stuff like that. So we just felt like it would be better, and the city council's been doing that. So that was the reason for doing this and for asking to suspend the rules so that it could be in effect by the November meeting.
We need to just hold that a second, because to have that discussion, we need to suspend the rule. So I would like to make a motion to suspend the second paragraph of policy 0131.1 bylaws and policies for the purpose of addressing policy 0167.3 public participation at board meetings.
Can I make a suggestion, Susan?
Oh,
That you add for tonight only to your motion. Just not, so we don't have suspended indefinitely.
I would make a friendly amendment to suspend that for 10/28/20 in relation to discussion of revised policy 0167.3.
Second.
either one. Elizabeth can have
you
You gotta be quick, Peter. You gotta be quick.
Sorry, Peter. Any more discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Peter,
Aye.
Susan Manning,
Aye.
Susan Fox,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Lorraine,
Aye.
Andrew, aye. Ayes have it, motion carries.
Well, and then Andrew, I'm going to make a motion to approve the revision. And then I think it'd be very helpful for both Susan and Elizabeth to weigh in, because we did discuss this in policy committee. And we're doing this to enhance the board's ability for virtual meetings. So I would make a motion to revise policy 0167.3 public participation at board meetings as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Peter?
I just read the language, and it says, if the board meeting provides the opportunity for virtual public comment, individuals must register to speak. Can I say, it should say, if the board meeting provides the opportunity for virtual public comment only, individuals must register to speak by notifying the board secretary. Does that make sense?
No, could you read that again?
Okay, sorry. Let's see. As
If the
it is
board-
amended, item B will be individuals wishing to speak at a board meeting at which public appearances are, it should be are, not is included, are included on the meeting agenda notice, may register by notifying the board secretary prior to the meeting, comma, or submitting a request to speak form to the board secretary or board president prior to the public appearance portion of the meeting. Period. If the board meeting provides opportunity for virtual public comment, individuals must register to speak by notifying the board secretary by noon on the date of the meeting. Now I'm going to stop there. So that assumes that we would offer a virtual but no in-person opportunity all the time. And I would just say we would amend that to that second sentence. If the board meeting provides only the opportunity for virtual public comment, then you have to be in by noon. Does that make sense?
No, because the reason it doesn't make sense is that Joyce is continuing to provide access to the board meeting, even though that piece is virtual, but you're actually present in the board meeting. And
Yeah,
that
so you can
muddies
make a public
things.
appearance now, Peter. If you go to the board meeting, it's all set up to do it.
Right.
Yeah, but according to this, you'd still have to notify by noon
And that, I think that's, yeah. that's
if
fine.
you wanted to make that in-person public appearance in the boardroom. You would still have to notify by noon. Is that the intent?
No, because it says it
It
says,
says if the meeting provides the opportunity for virtual public content.
right, and if they come in person, that's not virtual public comment, that's in
No,
person.
but it doesn't say they're making it. It says if the
Yeah.
board
Right, okay. That's
provides the opportunity, right? So if you can make a meeting in person, you should be able to do the same thing. And I don't sure how to work. Do you see my point?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Peter. I think like that we need to differentiate between I'm going to make a public appearance in person at the board meeting and I'm going to make a public appearance through the virtual platform.
Yeah. How about let's see, individuals wishing to make a virtual public appearance need to notify by noon is what the intent is, right?
Yeah, that's how I understood it, or that's what we need to do.
Right.
That's what we need to do to be organized, at least.
Yeah.
If they want to show up, they can just show up.
And I perfectly agree with that. However, according to this policy, if we offer that opportunity, if they show up at the meeting to make a in-person, they can't do it because they haven't notified us by noon.
I don't read it that way at all.
That isn't what it says, Peter.
No, it says if they want to make if they want to speak in person at a board meeting, which is what they would be doing if they came, they'd be speaking to us virtually, but they would be physically present speaking in person at the board meeting. Some of us might be at the board meeting for that
And
matter.
all they have to do is register. That's the first sentence. The
Yeah.
first sentence basically governs anyone wishing to speak in person at the board meeting. So if you come to the district office and want to speak at the board meeting based on Joyce being set up, that sentence would apply to you.
But are there two different things here? I think I'm
Yes.
I'm not understanding this right. So I understand you're saying they could come to the office and speak, but are we saying that there is no option for them to speak virtually, like at home, and not come to the office?
No, that's right there.
Well, then I
You have to,
go back to what
you-
Peter said, because then that's two different things.
it is two different things.
It
It's meant
says-
to be.
If the board meeting provides the opportunity for virtual public comment, individuals must register by noon. So if we give the opportunity, they must register by noon, regardless of what how they speak. And I just don't like ambiguous language in our policies, or difficult to interpret language in our policies. That's all.
Elizabeth?
I think Peter's right. I think the way that it's currently written, like now that I'm reading it, is that right? So if the board meeting provides this opportunity for virtual public comment, right? That's the if, and then the then is individuals must register. And so I think all we need to do is amend that to say individuals wishing to make a virtual public appearance must register before noon.
Yeah,
And I think
that's
that
right.
then it'll be enough
Yes.
because then it'll be
Right.
differentiated
That would-
between folks who
Yeah.
show up versus folks who want to make an individual contribution.
I guess I would say, then you should say, if the board meeting provides the opportunity for virtual public comment through virtual participation or something, because
Well-
it's just you make a comment by coming in person. That's your point. I just think it gets very muddy to try to differentiate here. I'm having trouble seeing the best way to do the language, I guess. To me, this captured the intent, but I see what you're saying. I just think it's reading way more into it than most people would, but I could be wrong. That's it.
Yeah, I understand the intent, but I just, let's see, hang on a second.
How about if you said individuals wishing to speak in person at a board meeting or in person
Can,
or virtual, in person, virtual, I don't know. See, nobody would know what that means. It's very hard to in person.
If the-
virtual.
how
To
about
me,
this?
in person means they show up and speak, period, whether they speak to us over Zoom or in person.
all right, let me make a suggestion. If the board, change that second sentence, if the board meeting provides the opportunity for virtual public comment, with individuals wishing to make their comments virtually must register to speak by notifying, etc.
Yes, that's the exact language I wrote as well, based on Elizabeth's comment. I think that does add clarity so that it's clear you can still come in person. That's sentence one. If you choose, and actually, if we had had time to rewrite this, we could have put them in separate paragraphs. We actually are gonna have major revisions to this as well at our next policy meeting because Neola has new ones.
Great.
So what we want to do is put something in place tonight so that people can appear virtually. So I don't have any problem with adding that language.
Can you read that again?
I just
Yeah, it's
sent
in
it
the
to everybody in
comments.
chat.
It's in the chat, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Individuals wishing to
comment virtually.
I had participate, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna-
Must register to speak by notifying the board secretary by noon on the date of the meeting.
so you would just add after the word individuals, you would add
Wishing to comment virtually.
all right, okay,
wishing to comment virtually. That's what
Yeah.
I have.
good. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so I would
So
make a
would you-
motion to,
Yep.
would make a motion to amend the proposed policy by adding the words individuals wishing to comment virtually to the second sentence of paragraph B. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
but the words are only wishing to comment virtually, not individuals.
Right.
It's
Yes, right.
Wishing
You're right. It's the words wishing to comment
comment
virtually.
virtually.
Yeah.
Correct.
Somebody
I
second
would
that?
second that.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call vote. Peter,
Aye.
Susan Manning,
Aye.
Elizabeth,
Aye.
Lorraine,
Aye.
Susan Fox,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Andrew, aye. Ayes have it, motion carries.
Now that was just to amend the proposal, so now we
Right.
have to vote on the main motion. right?
We still have to
Okay.
vote on the motion, on
as
the
amended.
policy.
Okay, so we go back
And-
to the,
And really, again, that's why we do two readings. And Peter, I appreciate you reading that in a different way. We were just trying to make sure we had the door open for people doing this virtually in a timely manner.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, just make it clear. That's all.
so we did have a first and second on this one as well, right?
Right.
Okay,
That's why we were discussing it. We could amend it because we had a first and second.
all righty. So roll call vote starting with Peter,
Aye.
Susan Manning,
hi,
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Lorraine,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
and Andrew, aye. Ayes have it, motion carries. Administrative report, we go to the superintendent's report. Dan?
Okay, and before I begin, could I just check in with Joyce to make sure are you good with your minutes to reflect the action just taken?
I got it. We're all good. Thank you.
Awesome.
And Dan, before you start, could you, the document that was posted for the board was not in the public section, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the public hasn't been able to see this or to provide input to us on this. This is just a presentation, so there will be a further opportunity for discussion. I mean, again, the community hasn't seen this document.
Right. This is my report to the board, and then you can decide what you want to do, with that following this evening. But we generally put reports or draft documents into admin content first to make sure board members have an opportunity to see that before you start getting calls from community members. And then after that, we can move it into public content.
I still didn't understand completely. I still don't understand completely why it wasn't posted publicly, since this is a public meeting and we are going to be discussing this document.
This meeting is not streamed
Yeah.
though, right?
Right.
Right. So, yeah.
This is not streamed?
Right.
No,
Oh, I thought it was public.
I thought it was too.
Well, it is public,
No.
but it's not streamed.
Why?
People have, because we usually don't stream special meetings.
special.
We've
yeah.
done it the last couple times because of the heightened interest in those topics, but yeah.
Is it being recorded?
Yes,
So they can see it?
yes,
After the meeting.
right.
Yes.
No, this will not be posted. The
Right. No.
recording, no, it is not being live streamed onto YouTube. There's no YouTube recording.
So
Well-
the public can't see this information or this discussion about the update on the reopening.
If they
And they
attended,
don't have the document.
Apparently the public is barking at your property.
Public stick out.
I guess I just assumed that since this was posted and public, that it would stream live. I didn't know that it wasn't.
Yeah, the
But
document is
now
not,
looking at, now I don't see the link, so.
Right. We don't generally stream special meetings like this. And part of that is Will's time and budget and the whole deal.
Well, sure, but
We
we're
have done
discussing
the
the,
last couple when it's been major issues about reopening.
but
Yeah,
we're
but we
discussing
just
the
approved the
reopening plan,
budget.
though.
all right, so let me, if I could clarify, we did make an exception to the last two special meetings because clearly there was public interest and the board was taking action at the last two meetings. There's no action this evening on reopening. It's just my update to the board on the planning process.
but we just approved the budget.
Yeah. I mean, in some sense, this is the most important meeting of the year. And we might be doing fewer board meetings, which means we move stuff to special meetings, which means we need to think hard about those special meetings that we need to broadcast. And because normally we would have done the budget approval in a regular meeting and it would be broadcast.
Yeah.
So I think we need to think about that if we're going to do fewer board meetings. But the other question is, will this be put on the YouTube channel so people can stream it later?
No, he's saying no,
No, because it's not recorded.
which
No, it is
is
recorded.
which is a
It is
bigger
recorded.
problem that I have.
That's my problem. I don't mind if it's not live streaming, but
It's only recorded on Zoom. It's not being recorded by Will, so it will not be on.
Right, Joyce is recording so she can double check her minutes.
Yeah, but she could, I mean, that recording can be turned into a YouTube video with a click. Would be my comment on that. Or two, might take more.
I would suggest this would be a policy discussion that you may want to consider as a board.
Okay.
why would it be policy? Isn't it just a discussion? So I would support, if this is being recorded, I would support finding a way to post this because we just approved the levy
The
limit
budget.
and the budget.
Levy, yeah.
I would agree.
If you want to take board action, it's not agendized for action. That's if you want to make a decision as a board.
It says possible action item,
On the,
budget.
we're on my report right now.
No, I know that, Dan, but I going back to the budget, that was an action item though.
Right, but you're discussing the board's desire to live stream board meetings.
No,
No.
we want to just make sure that this is accessible to the public.
It is.
Fully.
It's an open
And they
meeting.
I understand. But one of the things that we could do is after the fact, without any additional work on our part, send it to Will and have him the recorded video and have him put it on like he does with other board meetings.
I guess I have a question for you, Dan. Why wouldn't we want this to be public? I'm having a hard time understanding, like, why shouldn't it be public even if it is a special meeting, if the budget and the discussion of the reopening plan is on there? Why wouldn't it be public?
It is.
But why are you laughing? Because I don't think it's funny. I think it's pretty serious.
Eric,
considering the amount of
this
input
you
and
have
phone calls and emails that I'm getting on a daily basis. I think it's a fairly serious thing to consider. I don't think it's funny at all.
Eric, we have hundreds of board meetings, okay? You have a contract with the city of Monona for live streaming. You live stream your regular board meetings, okay? That has been the practice for years and years and years. This is nothing out of the ordinary. And so if you want to consider expanding the live streaming, we need to talk about that.
Dan, everything is out of the ordinary right now. Everything we're doing is out of the ordinary right now. Nothing we are doing is normal or how it typically is done. Every single thing we're doing right now and will be doing for a while is out of the ordinary.
Susan Fox.
Can I suggest that if people are this concerned about this, that maybe this be a topic of conversation at the November board meeting, if people want to make some change and to say something about when we're making a decision, really, when we're even discussing reopening, or because to sit here and spend 20 minutes arguing about whether this should have been recorded or not doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I think we do have to be cognizant of Will's budget and his time. And if this was a meeting that we wanted recorded, maybe we can do that retroactively. I just don't want to spend 20 more minutes talking about it here.
Right.
That's just my feeling.
Elizabeth.
I agree with Susan. And also I think it's worth us remembering that this was, apart from the policy pieces, this was content that was on our last regular board meeting. And then we decided, right, to move that to a different agenda. So I think part of a good learning for us then is when we do that, right, and we have to have a special board meeting to then have a discussion around whether or not that meeting should be then live streamed like our regular board meetings are. But this was supposed to be the budget conversation, if I'm recalling correctly, was on the agenda at last week's regular board meeting, correct?
No. So
I thought
budget,
it was.
yeah, because the budget, we have to wait until Jared gets his state equalization, values and so on. So that traditionally is always a special meeting the last week of October. So the budget was not one of the items that was on there.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Susan Manning.
Want to say something?
So
If I could just clear, I'm sorry.
just let me just make a suggestion for all of us. First of all, we have board norms and we have to speak respectfully to each other and thoughtfully, particularly during this time. And Dan, I appreciate your input and I would appreciate your thoughts about, I think because we did do the budget, and that's the reason I'm talking about wanting the recording out there. Not so much on you reporting out superintendent report information and updating us. It's because we voted on the budget and we made some major decisions, whether it was deferred from another board meeting. So Elizabeth, if we had done this in the regular board meeting, this would have been available to people to see. And I think this is one of the reasons I think this is a critical issue right now is because we're walking into a referendum on November 3rd. And when Jared presents, his knowledge base is so good and he explains things extremely well. And whether you had the same questions Peter did or you didn't, you had questions asked about particular things that might be helpful in relation to making a positive decision about this referendum because people feel more informed and better informed. So
I totally agree with what you said.
I'm thinking, Dan, if it's okay, again, it's the budget part that's really important to me. That if it's okay, and it would make you more comfortable, we could make a motion to have, in this particular situation, and it doesn't have to be routine, we can make this request based on what the agenda looks like for a special meeting. We rarely record special meetings or committee meetings. If you would be comfortable, we could, as a board, make a motion to have this recorded so the community could view the budget issue. So I'm getting a lot of questions right now because of the voting and the referendum. And again, I thought the information, it was fairly specific, but
Could we hear what Joyce had to say first? Because I think she was going to say something pertinent to this.
yes.
I was just going to say, normally I'm going to look back years. Last year, we had a special meeting only for the budget and the levy, and I think that's normal, and it's a special meeting and they are not recorded. So last year, we did the exact same thing in a special meeting on October 30th of last year.
Thank
I
you.
would-
Boy, I
George.
wasn't aware that
would-
it wasn't recorded.
I would
I
just
would-
add that normally people can come and see them in person.
Yeah. I would say that, to Eric's point, it's a new world, and and to be honest, I didn't think about this issue before right now, and we need to be thoughtful about a whole new range of things going forward, and what's the right way to do for us to do in the going forward. And I'm not saying that we have to do the full live stream each time, but for example, we could take this recording and post it on the Monona YouTube channel and people could review it. I do think it's important. We have to think about this. So I think putting it on our next meeting for discussion would be a good thing to do.
Okay.
Dan,
So
what do you-
let me, can I just add this? I really meant no disrespect when I was smiling and what I was thinking to myself, this is coming up at the end of the meeting, we talk about future meeting dates. And one of the potential dates you're going to talk about tonight is scheduling a board workshop with your attorney, Mike Jalka, to talk about this exact very issue with board governance and decision-making. Okay, and so absolutely it's a relevant discussion. But you need to make that decision as a board. And we need to talk about how to do that. And I certainly own some responsibility in that as well, to make sure that you have an opportunity to have those discussions. So my point was that, well, it's been made. I'll stop.
I mean, as a board, as a public body, I think that we should err on the side of openness. And I don't think a board decision is needed to be made when it comes to openness. A board decision could be made when we're not being open. And you're right, I don't think for the workshop with Jelka we need to do a public thing, but when we're talking about the budget, I think we do. When we're approving the budget, I think we do. And so it's worth a little bit more consideration and thoughtfulness about this. And probably what we need, so long as we're virtual, is a system going forward where board member can say, I think this discussion should be live streamed, or I think that it should be posted, and that we can move forward to that. So like I said, I think we should just put this on the next agenda so we can think about it, what we want, and come up with a consensus about what it is we want you to do to help us fulfill our obligations to the public.
Susan Manning?
Yeah, I think we should do it tonight. And the reason I think, again, Dan, I think this is really unusual. I was not aware that our budget discussion last year was not being taped. Understanding it may not have been in a regular board meeting. I think our intent was to have this taped because this was previously agendized in a different meeting. This meeting was called to have this discussion. We're going to referendum next week. And if this is taped and put up now, I can tell people they can go in and hear Jared review an update on this year's budget. And he does talk about where money is being spent and how it's being spent, and he does it extremely well. I think it's a positive information piece for us right now.
Susan Fox.
Can I just point out that the annual meeting is where he goes into this in great detail all the time, and we saw what the attendance was at that meeting this year. I mean, we do that is always live. It's always public. It was streamed. People can go back and watch this. Every year, he announces at that meeting that the board will be meeting again once we get the October 15th certification, and we will be tweaking the budget. So people do know that. It's not like we're trying to hide something. I don't have a problem is streaming the budget. I just don't think we're going to get any more audience than we normally get at the annual meeting, but that's my opinion. And I don't have any problem with, if we can do this easily enough, converting this to YouTube and streaming it tonight. It'd be nice to cut out this whole piece, but because nobody will last through it. But I
So
think, you know, if you
just
really
make
want to
the
do
motion.
that, that's okay. I just don't. And then I think we should look at how many people actually look at it too, just for interest's sake. But,
Yeah.
I mean, because really, the annual meeting, which in a budget year, in a year like this, was a big deal, and we didn't even have people there to make motions. I mean, we had one person who had to make every motion. It was the worst attendance we've ever had, and
Yeah,
you know,
because
so
we're
I
in the
just
middle of a
don't know
pandemic.
how much of a big deal I think this is. Do I think it's worth spending a half hour talking about? No, I don't.
No, I agree.
So anyway.
So,
But I do
Dan,
agree about cutting out this part, particularly the part where I apparently don't understand our agendas for previous meetings.
so I'm gonna just step in. Dan, could we just move your superintendent report to the regular meeting, board meeting? Is that okay? Or do we
Well,
really need to discuss?
No,
I'd actually like to hear that tonight. No, I don't
That
want
isn't what we want to do. All we want to do is put this meeting out for the public to be able to see it, because the major impact and portion of this is about more information about the budget, and we're going to referendum. So we can vote it down. You can even not second it, but I'm going to make a motion.
We can't really act on anything today, right?
Yeah.
What?
Not
We can't
noticed.
formally act on anything tonight because this isn't
Right.
agendized to even talk about for as long as we've talked about it. I think if people want to make a simple request, can this be taped and shown? That's not a big deal. I mean, is it? I don't know. I don't know what's entailed in doing that.
I mean, if it's something that's not an
I don't
action of
care.
the
Let me
board.
put-
Dan, what do you,
Okay, we will absolutely make sure there's an opportunity to discuss and have the board's wishes followed through on pertaining to live streaming. We'll make sure that happens. With regard to my report, the only reason this is on the agenda, it would have been the budget only. We added the item about the policy because the policy committee was ready to go. We wanted to have that acted on so you could have it take effect as soon as possible. And then I thought, as long as we're meeting tonight, I would have done this just as an email to you saying, here's the timeline of what we've been working on since the last meeting. I thought as long as we're meeting, I might as well also make it an oral report so you can ask, any questions. Even though it's a long report, it's really a one-page report. All the other stuff is just stuff I copy and pasted from public health to give you an update on their data and so on. So really what I wanted to share tonight was that first page and let you know what has happened since last week's board meeting.
Proceed.
yes.
So why can't we just record this? You
It is-
implied that this was easy to do. Why can't we just do it and put it out there in case
It's
people
recorded.
want to watch it?
It's being
We
recorded.
record now. We don't have Will here, so that's why we can't
No.
do it on
No,
YouTube.
you just put it out. It's already being recorded. so-
Right, it's already being recorded on Zoom, Susan. There's nothing to. there's
Yeah, so
nothing more
you
we can do
release
than
it
what's
after
being
the
done.
meeting.
Right,
Except that Joyce needs to send it to Will.
right.
Okay, so are we under the understanding that that is going to happen?
Can that
I
happen,
will
Joyce?
follow up and let you know. It's not that simple when you record.
Okay.
Normally we record right to YouTube. So it's a
Right.
different process. So I will follow up and get back to the board on that.
Yeah, if Will
thank
can't
you.
do it, then we understand that. But
Yeah.
if it's possible, then I think, is there consensus from the board that we would like that to happen?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
Okay. So since last week, I'm just showing the first page of the memo. The first part is relating to parent communication. Okay, and so between now and the reopening of January 25th for K through 2, this week we were looking at finalizing that parent communication. And we talked about how essential it is that we really have the parents really clearly understand what this would look like if in the hybrid model. And so putting that all, fine tuning that, the draft is pretty much ready to go at the beginning of the week, but we'll finalize that tomorrow. And then the survey as well is ready to go, and we will send that out by Friday. And we have determined that we would like to have a 2-week opportunity for parents to consider that, be able to ask follow-up questions as needed, and with their surveys due by November 15th. That then will give us the opportunity to start looking at how many sections do we need of each, and so on. So 2 weeks to do that, and then by November 27th, we'll be able to start developing our bus routes, 2-week period for that. And with the goal then before our winter break by approximately December 14th to be able to inform parents of their students' assignment into which cohort as well as their bus schedule. So I guess I didn't need to read that. You can read it yourself. So let me stop there. Are there any questions on the timeline with regard to parents and their choice?
Andrew? Oh, Andrew.
Susan Manning. I can't. I only can see.
You can't see us. Okay, Dan. I just have one quick question. Could you just elaborate? I think the time frame is fine, and whatever works for you, I think is good. So one of the things you talk about is finalized parent communication for instructional options, and I kind of wondered how you planned to do that, because if it's in writing, they can't ask you back. Is there a way that you could do, again, your referendum meetings have been absolutely excellent. I mean, if you could offer 3 virtual meetings where you would, I mean, it's one, you could send the information out, but then you could offer 3 virtual meetings where people could come in.
Yeah, so absolutely, we have had that discussion. We haven't scheduled that yet, so that's why it's not in the memo, but we have had that discussion about that opportunity. One of the things as far as that written communication, clearly you as board members have seen a lot of documentation already, trying to add to that and some clarification points that we've talked about. So the written part, yeah, is a really important thing. And you're right, we want to make sure that there is an opportunity for parents to ask questions. And so the other thing we're doing is our principals are, engaging our staff in conversations this week as well, knowing that teachers also will be getting questions, from parents, and to make sure everyone is on the same page. And so, as far as an opportunity to follow up with questions with teachers and principals, of course, and then Susan, we are considering the idea of virtual meetings as well.
And I'm not saying, again, your referendum meetings have been absolutely excellent. And I know they haven't been greatly well attended, but the PTO meetings were fairly well attended. And I think it makes the community feel like you're giving them that opportunity. One of the criticisms we've gotten recently, particularly from a particular group, is that we haven't really opened that pathway. So I think going forward, it would be wonderful. Again, those have been great meetings, and you've been very receptive to the people. And
yep. Appreciate the feedback. Yep. So.
I guess
go ahead, Susan Fox.
Related question too. So the communication that you're working on will give a really clear explanation, not only of how the hybrid works, but what the classroom setup will be like. I mean, just to give them some idea of what this is really going to be like. And also the fact that regardless of what choice they make, there may be some teacher reassignment, just so everybody's clear on that. I mean, because they really don't have any control over that. And we had emails coming from people that wanted both things, saying, but I want to keep my same teacher. And just so they all know, can't be a guaranteed.
Definitely. Thank you.
Oh, Dan, one of the questions I had was, if you're a family of 3 children, can they select like 2 on virtual and 1 in, well, let's say you probably wouldn't have you might have 2 children in that 4K too. Could they opt one for one and one for the other?
Yep, great question. And the answer is yes. So we are going to ask them to complete a separate survey for each child.
I would,
Go ahead, Peter.
communication I've had, if you have a child who's at risk in some way, you're not going to choose an in-person option for the child that's not at risk because of the risk of exposure. That's where I've seen where we've had this split issue, and I don't think that that's going to happen. That's a concern.
Yep. Okay.
Lorraine?
I know it's not really related to what you presented, but are we in contact with like the substitute pool?
Yeah, great question. And actually the answer is yes. So one of the things that we are going to be doing, or actually Nicole, if she hasn't done it yet, we'll do it by the end of the week. We are going to post right now for long-term subs for the second semester, and ideally be able to hire 2 or 3 permanent long-term subs per grade level to have available assigned to the buildings. Yeah, that is a really huge concern about having subs available.
And what about short-term?
Yeah, and then, well, so part of it would be to have people available that way. We do have our normal short term, but we really need to kind of pre-plan for that. We can't just, because there's so much training involved with all the protocols. And so our goal is as well to reach out to the folks who have been short-term subs and really get them on board in advance and to kind of, so yes, that is a big piece about the sub pool. And then I'll just share briefly some of the preliminary conversations we've had and some of the things we have learned from some of the districts that have been open. The idea of what if we are not able to secure a sub, say we have a teacher who needs to self-quarantine, but is capable then of working from remotely. Could we, in an emergency situation, have a support staff member supervise the students in the classroom while the teacher is delivering instruction remotely? And yeah, that would be an option. Not ideal, but it's a way of keeping, without having to close down the classroom and send the kids home.
Is that a legal thing to do?
As long as the teacher is the one delivering the instruction, yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that given the flexibility, one of the things we have to do is look at creative way we can fill the substitute need with the staff that we already have.
Yeah.
Personally, I think in normal times it would be better, and I know that there's a cost issue, but to have people on staff who are substitutes, who can, because we have a substitute need every day. And right. And if we had some level of ability to fulfill our own substitute needs, I think it would be better for students. And it might be a cost issue, but I think it would be better for students if we had teachers who are in our system and understand how we do things and where we are.
Yeah.
So I would encourage you to be creative to meet the substitute need with the staff that we already have.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
What you just suggested was an excellent way to deal with it.
And that's one of the things I didn't want to jump in, but Jared had mentioned about, I think he did mention briefly, in some of the unknowns about the budget, the staffing needs. And that would be, ideally is we are able to find people and bring them in and have the additional substitutes on hand in the building. So,
right.
Okay. Any other, that kind of leads into the second part is the timeline for teacher and support staff assignments. So Nicole did get a communication out today. And first of all, it informed everyone that they will have an opportunity coming up soon to indicate their preferences. But right now we want to start on the folks that have needs as far as accommodations for medical or family issues. So whether it be accommodations or leave requests. And the information she shared with the board last week with the different types of leaves, that's all included in her communication. And we're asking staff then to get back to her by November 4th. We already had a number of staff already do this, but to make sure that everyone understands that, they need to communicate if they have special circumstances that are documented first. Those would be the highest priority, of course. And then the follow-up will be then for all staff to put to make requests for preferences and other considerations. Along with that, I did meet with our MGA leadership and specifically with Mendy Doris to talk about some of those criteria. And right now it's still a draft form, but I'm very pleased the list that Mendy came up with matched our list perfectly as far as what the criteria should be. So I will share that out with the board at my next report as well. Like I said, it's still a kind of in a draft form right now, but it's things we've kind of talked about that are, personal preferences, childcare needs, things like that. And so that would be, again, and I don't have to repeat what's in writing there as far as the timeline. Likewise, by early December to have everything finalized then with that as well.
Elizabeth?
So then, Dan, would the idea be then after December 4th, when teacher assignments are given to parents, that there'd be some kind of like transition or shifting in the virtual world prior to coming in on the 25th?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've talked about kind of in a preliminary basis is kind of treating this as this school year as part A and part B. And so that our planning for January is kind of like our typical August planning. So even about when would we notify folks who their teacher is? Typically that happens about the third week or third week of August. We haven't I didn't put the date on there yet, but that's one of the considerations. And then absolutely to have some sort of, if there is a change with teachers, to have some sort of a meet and greet opportunity with the new teacher in advance. And so as we get closer, I'll definitely be, those will be in the future updates. We've talked about that week before the 25th is exam week for the high school students for finals. And we actually have 2 in-service days, that Monday and Friday. Might we for grades K2, since there's only 3 days of instruction that week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe those should be planning days and those meet and greet opportunities and so on in that transition. So those are kind of the preliminary discussions that we're having. And again, that will all get fleshed out real soon that we can share out with you.
Okay. Any more questions?
I have one more, Andrew.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
So I think it makes sense to like think about it like as you would at the beginning of the year. So are you approaching student placement like that then too? Apart from the obvious fact that like I'm an in-person person and I have to go to an in-person teacher, but kind of the other contextual factors for placement.
I think so. I mean, clearly the first preference is, as we know, keeping the student with their current teacher. But I think as the shifts that we do have to make, I think those same considerations about how we place students together. Absolutely.
So is there opportunity on the parent survey then, or whatever the communication is, for parents to kind of indicate any of those types of things? I don't, that you would do like normally, like I feel like I don't know how it actually works here, but a lot of times like a teacher will write like good friends with so-and-so or whatever those things are. Is there any opportunity for that kind of input?
We talked about that, and I'll be honest, I don't recall if that made it into the final survey for that. And I don't know how relevant it is, to be honest. I'll ask that question tomorrow because, we can make final tweaks tomorrow. We have our final planning meeting. But clearly, the parents had an opportunity to do that way back, whenever it was prior to the school year. Now, is that still relevant, a couple months later? I'm not sure. That's a good point. So I'll ask that, and that'd be an easy insert into the survey.
Yeah, I mean, only if it's relevant and value added.
Yeah.
Susan Fox. You're on mute, Susan.
That's my dog. Not specifically about this part, but are we going to continue to talk a little bit about some of the other information in your report in terms of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure before okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Dan, to take you back kind of to Elizabeth's question, but so our understanding, at least right now, and we know that things could change momentarily, wherever possible, you're going to try and keep students with their same teachers. And that may not work, but you're going to try and do that. I don't understand how Elizabeth's question fits in about saying, my child really enjoys being with this child. We've never allowed that to be a factor in classroom choices before. I thought the priority would be trying to stay with the same teacher, and if you can't, then working on the meet and greet. Could you just clarify that?
Yeah, I think the actual question that is asked generally every year prior to class placement are things about your child, particularly the lower elementary. You know, can you tell us about your child's learning needs and you know, those sorts of things that should be, you know, considered. You know, so I don't know that. In fact, I know we don't ask that question. Parents write in what they write in, you know, but I think the point is, say we have, you know, 10 students that need to be placed with the new, or how many students it is. I think as those students that do have to switch teachers, as they're placed, I think the normal criteria about, you know, how those kids are placed, I think would still apply. Now, normally it's done kind of on a random basis. Then there is a check to make sure we do check and look at students with disabilities, students EL status and things like that to make sure that, you know, with the random selection, we didn't necessarily have clusters in certain areas and so on. So I think those normal things that are done to try to, you know, place kids, I think would be done again. It'd be much smaller scale because hopefully it is, as you mentioned, you know, it's not everyone that's moving.
Yeah, and just to kind of clarify my question too, is I 100% agree, Dan, and that is a lot what I was asking. And also in regards to like peer support, there is an opportunity here a little bit differently, I think, than we've done previously to think about like, so if I am this child and I'm in a small group with these same 3 kids that I've seen every day, and like we all have to change teachers together, kind of to what extent do we think about clustering kids that at least seen each other all year, right? Even though they're both changing teachers, so that like, you know, whatever, Elliot and some other kid can sort of be together, and just thinking through that a little bit differently. And parents may have different insights there because they're watching their kids in a different way than they have before.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'll say we haven't had those in-depth discussions yet, but I am confident that as we move through, those are the kind of conversations that our staff will have about, you know, and that's a good point. That might, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would go a long way toward mitigating some of the difficulty of getting a new teacher. I mean, to the extent you can do that, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Peter?
It is a brave new world, and a lot of the kids' socialization is something we really need to think about. So maybe it's an appropriate time to take additional considerations about what parents are concerned about with socialization into account. So, I mean, it's not business as usual. It might be time to think about things a little differently if in terms of parent requests and socialization and kids with kids, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay. Then I think the last piece, the next steps is pretty self-explanatory. A lot of that work has been done already, but just to, you know, obviously finalize every single space in the buildings, you know, that are marked appropriately and so on, and, you know, the classroom setups and. Okay. All right. So yeah, I thought it would take just an opportunity, not go through the data. You can read it yourself, but just, you know, kind of one section at a time to see if there are any questions or comments that you might have. So again, what I copied and pasted here, a lot of this is very similar to what you can read online on public health blog posts and data posts, but this actually came directly from our meeting notes from last Friday. And so some of it's written a little bit differently than what's on their website. So again, I just thought as long as I have the memo here, I thought I'd just copy and paste it so it's easy access for you. And if it's okay, you know, you let me know when to stop, but otherwise I'll just keep sharing this out with you as I get it. And if you're interested, you can look at it. If not, clearly I think it's pretty, you know, the big picture is, of course, the numbers continue to rise in Dane County. They do continue to, from time to time, put out a little bit different type of charts. And so last week, they're kind of noticed the tracking of cases kind of moving outside the city to the suburbs, and the percentage of cases in Dane County increasing. And I think I put this in my email to you as well. And not that this is conclusive by any means, but I thought it was interesting that Cottage Grove made the list. Just as a point of reference, with 4% of the cases in Cottage Grove represents about 1.2% of the population of Dane County. Again, the sample size is small enough that you may or may not be relevant, but thought that was interesting.
That's a really interesting chart. What it shows is that downtown Madison had a spike because the students came back.
Yeah, and
Right.
and they have, yep, and there does seem to start to be a little bit of evidence now of kind of that spillage, as it's extending out. Yeah. So.
And is Monona's not on there, and Madison is all others? Is that what it is?
Correct. So Monona, that means is one of the lower percentages from the comparatively for the county, and you can draw your own conclusions why that may or may not be.
Right. And then Madison also is in part of that all others group too? Or not?
No, so yeah, so I think those percentages should add up to 58%. Okay. So 42% of the cases are in the city of Madison.
Okay, so Monona is with all the other places
Correct.
around Dane County that have less than 4%.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then that next section on the school metrics question, that was one of the things that had kind of been a repeated question when in our superintendent's meetings that, we have been getting a lot of questions from our community members about, well, but Dane County's metrics are so much more strict than everyone else. And so this was their response to, again, how they another response to how they came up with the metrics and showed, 3 different examples, the Minnesota, Harvard, and CDC models about what their metrics were for, the cases and so on. So relevant or not, just a little bit more information, again, to compare nationally about where Dane County's metrics. And you can see, I think you can make the argument that, no, they're not necessarily out of line. But they are very different, as you go in these different areas. So this is the same chart I've been updating. And, again, obviously just a slight uptick this last week again. Okay, so why don't I stop there before we get into the sports? Any other comments or questions about just in general the data from Dane County?
Yeah, I just want one that the first half of that chart is due to inadequate testing is all that I would have to say.
I think that's a fair statement. I'm not an epidemiologist, but I think that, yeah. Yeah. So, okay. Then next, we have been talking quite a bit about sports. Obviously, you've heard from parents about that. It's on your minds. And so the requirements, orders, so on, have all been in place since July from public health. They haven't changed, but we have been asking for some clarifying questions. Now, it was a little bit easier in the fall because at least we were able to kind of punt and say, okay, we're going to schedule the fall for the spring, buy us a little bit of time. Hopefully things will change. Well, now that we're in the winter, there's no more rescheduling. It's either we do or we don't. And so these are just some of the questions that have been asked and then the official response from public health. And some of these is kind of, again, just rewriting what's already been in the documents you've seen. But I thought instead of picking and choosing, I just copied and pasted the whole thing. There were 6 questions on there. So the one thing that I've been interested in, and you've heard from some parents about, well, why don't we do what Edgewood did and just go around the rules by going outside of Dane County? So that's one of the questions that I was really interested in. It's not reflected in here, but we do have 2 attorneys that also are joining our meetings regularly. Mike Jalka being one of them, and the other person, attorney by the name of Lori Levinsky, that also represents a number of school districts. And so Lori did put together a document. Now, she's not our attorney, so I'm not at liberty to share, but it's probably not a surprise. An order is an order. We have a legal obligation to follow, period. But then the question is, well, what about recommendations? Is there some sort of liability as a public school district if we don't follow recommendations? And the answer is yes. And so without reading through her whole memo, I'll just read 2 sentences. The question legally will be whether ignoring recommendations from a county health department and permitting winter sports is ignoring a known danger. And predicting what a court would do with that argument is anyone's guess. However, I will give you my prediction. I believe a court would find that any district that violates a clear recommendation from a county health department is permitting a known date. And so bottom line, and Jared has followed up as well with our own liability insurance, carrier with this. And so we absolutely, I think, have an obligation to follow recommendations, the best we can. And so I guess I'll stop there.
I don't think you have to sell us on this one, Dan.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and Dan, so this, and I think I had this question too, not about sports, but just the about school opening, but it's still relevant with sports, and that is basically saying similar to what we had agreed on with following Dane County Public Health for opening schools, because we are going by their recommendations. That covers us legally.
Yeah.
But with sports, going by their recommendation means that we cannot have winter sports right now, correct?
That's correct.
Right. So if it's not, we don't have the option like opening, 4K2, because that falls under the recommendations. There is no recommendation that meets the criteria where we could even open sports and not be liable.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
Thank you.
So what I will add, and some of you have inquired, so they have in their requirements and in their recommendations, we do fall under their mass gathering requirements. And so we can legally, within their order even, we could bring in small groups of up to 10, as long as we ensure that they are physically distanced at all times. And so there have been some schools that have done that, where they'll have a coach with 10 kids in a gym where they're separated. It's more of an individual workout type thing, whether it be shooting baskets or doing some other sort of physical training. And so we are exploring that. I did ask Jeff Schreiner to work with the high school administration and their coaches to develop a plan, should that be something, and it has to be totally optional for our kids. It wouldn't be considered a mandatory practice. But I do expect him to come back with the plan on how we can do that. And I told him I wanted in time for when the winter sports season begins, which is November, for the earliest is November 16th. Okay. With the idea that if by chance something changes and we are able to compete later in the winter, at least there might be an opportunity that kids can, have contact with their coaches and some individual workouts. So nothing's been approved, but that's what we're working on.
Peter?
Can we run a camp? What I'm thinking about is giving kids in the community an option to, we do this in the summer, but an option to come in, with appropriate, a coach, 10 kids separated, and make it open to anybody, not just those who have qualified for the teams, so that there can be some physical education and some opportunity to get out of the house come January and run around in a gym for kids.
Absolutely. So we can do it a couple different ways. So at this point, we have officially suspended the winter sports season. We haven't canceled, with the chance that maybe something will change. So so we will actually have the kids register for their winter sports. And so they do still follow under WIA guidelines. And so if it is specifically with a basketball coach, that would fall, it would be considered technically a practice. But what we would not do is turn any kid away. For one thing, you can't do tryouts under these conditions. It wouldn't be fair to say, well, these kids are varsity and whatever. You haven't had a chance to even make that selection. So it would be open to all students. But then aside from someone officially on a team, we do have a coach or one of our coaches that is also our weight room, coordinator, that could do the exact same thing, fitness things for any kids. They wouldn't have to be associated with a sport. So I think all that is on the table, including middle school as well, not just high school.
Right. And even younger kids if necessary. I mean, it's a new world. The winter is this is getting tougher for everybody. I could go to off Broadway because they had seating outside. I can't do that anymore because it's too freaking cold. And is there, like I said, maybe we run a camp for kids. We do we do in the summer.
And that's.
But I would just urge you to be creative and find ways to, within the guidelines and safely serve kids their physical, physical education needs.
Yeah.
Opportunities.
Thank you, Peter. And I also want to add, it's not just athletics, it's also activities. So
We tend to forget that.
yeah, and it does need to be opportunities for all kids.
Jeff is athletics and activities director.
Yeah.
And I think we should just change the name to activities director, right?
That is his title, I think.
Is it?
Yeah, I think it is.
It's
Yeah.
athletic.
Because
I think it got changed a few years ago because he took on all of it. But I think also, Dan, you mentioned the middle school, and that would be Dan Zweifel for sports, I guess, but even other kinds of things there too.
Yeah.
I agree. I think we have to, this is already getting really hard for kids, even for whom the virtual stuff was working better. And I think the more kinds of things we can do to get 10 kids, even if, even in a home ec room, to cook something sometime for 10 kids. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
I see more kids out and around the neighborhood. And right now in October, it's one thing, but in January, it's going to be a different thing. So let's think about that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Susan, I jumped on that.
Elizabeth?
Well, I've already been, I mean, Dan's tired of hearing me talk about this because I do think,
not at all.
I think it is an important thing. And I think, I'd like to look at more than just, as you said, Peter, more than just official team sports and even more than sports in general, just if there are other ways to provide kids with some activity.
We have these facilities.
So Dan, could we,
community service fund, let's use it.
could we ask for, just, again, you've done a great job of I know our primary focus right now is 4K2 and the hybrid and being able to make that work. It's my impression from what you're kind of giving to us tonight that there is an opportunity for coaches to, once winter season starts, for each of the sports, for them to be running some kind of programming with 10 students. Now, I guess my first question is, there was individual gymnastics, individual swimming, and individual dance. They're considered low risk, so they're accepted. So are you going to have information for each of those sports and what they're going to be able to do and what's going to be offered for them?
Yeah, every sport individually will have different opportunities.
Okay, and so if at some point you could kind of give us a little bit of a schedule. So we're looking at the possibility of November, what was that?
Right, so our next board meeting is November 11th. The winter sports season officially starts for some of those sports November 16th. Some of the others are a week or two after that. So my intention is by the November 11th to have another update for you on what those plans look like.
Okay, and there'll be kind of a, like you did here, kind of a schedule, kind of during this week, we're going to try and do this, clean the gym, and this week we're going to do this, and this, is that?
I think so. I guess I haven't seen, I mean, I've had conversations with Jeff Schreiner about what that might look like. But I'll need to work with him on whatever he has put together, whether I can just take it and share with the board or whether I need to, update it. So, but I'll make sure we have that information. Yes.
Okay. So I just don't want to misunderstand this. So let's just say basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So on that November date, you're working on a plan, do I have this right, to somehow allow the students who are interested, for instance, in high school, just to start in high school basketball, to be able to come in and work out with some type of coaching staff in groups of 10.
Yeah. Yeah, so Jeff and the high school other administrators are working with the coaches to develop what that looks like, exactly. And you're right, and that's a big part of it is schedule. Who gets the gym at what time, how many coaches are available. The other thing you need to be aware of, we do have some coaches that for the same reason we have teachers that don't want to return to the building to teach with concerns, we have coaches with the same concerns. So not every coach will automatically be participated in this. And so, and you know, the other thing is typically for basketball, I mean, there are times where we have 30, 40 freshmen try out for a team. You know, unfortunately, we have to make cuts at time. At this point, there will be no cuts. I mean, there's no tryouts. And so if we have 30 or 40 boys that want to participate, the schedule's got to be able to accommodate that and rotate them through at 10 at a time.
Elizabeth.
At some point you could tell us about hockey, because I have no idea how you're gonna pull that off.
Yep.
I don't see that one coming back. That one's real
Your
high risk.
backyard, Elizabeth.
Yeah, right. Everyone can come, 3 students at a time. And also while you're there, you can babysit my children. Take up my leaves. I just want to, 2 things. I want to echo Peter's point around kind of the creativity around physical activity for kids, you know, whether it's through sports or whatever. I think that winter is going to be hard. I think it's already sedentary because you're virtual and you're at home. I mean, even at school, at least you get the benefit of like moving from class to class. So there's like that sort of that built-in movement that happens, which we can't obviously guarantee at home. So to the extent that we can provide something that would be in support of that, I think is good. That'll help mental health as well. But I just wanted to clarify around the sports pieces. I had to go back to my notes from last week, but like just to clarify, even if they come back and do small practices, there's still no competition, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And are there other public schools in Dane County that are planning on winter sports returning?
I'm not aware of any at this time. I'm sure there's some conversations by a couple of them, but
Dan, let them know that the Big 8, which is the big Madison schools and stuff, they had canceled the season.
Okay.
So they would not do a season. Our conference, we suspended, so we have a glimmer of hope.
Got it.
And I don't know about Peter. We have a glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
But I don't know about the other schools outside of Dane County or the smaller schools. That's up to those commissioners.
Yeah, I just wasn't going to pay attention to those schools because I think for the discussion earlier, right? Like I think this idea that we would somehow skirt the recommendations feels so irresponsible and reckless that I don't know why we would entertain it.
Well, and I thought Dan implied that if we took a team and went and played outside of Dane County, there's potential legal liability.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Correct.
Also, while we're talking about that, at the very end of your notes, there is that article kind of refuting, epidemiologists refuting the study that showed that sports aren't spreading the coronavirus. And I think we should all read that because it's just helpful to know that it's kind of like not so fast is what they're saying.
Yeah. So those of you that did your work and read your board docs in advance, you wouldn't have seen this. I just uploaded this like an hour before the meeting, added those 2 links.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't have any resources, Dan.
Yeah, so that just came in.
I did it earlier today.
Yeah, but as Susan said, read it, and I think it kind of speaks for itself. You know, the second article, and I'll just say, you need to understand the WIA. A number of superintendents, including myself, are extremely, extremely disappointed with the leadership of WIAA. They have got at all costs trying to keep their seasons open for revenue purposes, in my mind, at the expense of kids. And they worked with a particular person at UW to do this study to try to make their case that they should, but this is opinion, okay? But they did collaborate on this.
I've been disappointed with the leadership at WIAA since they said that you couldn't use a football and a football and soccer on the same pitch.
Right.
Yeah.
Which cost a lot of money.
And now, now you look at the Badgers. They can't play Saturday.
Yeah.
So this is proven. So I don't even care about this study.
Yeah. The bottom line is the study is not peer reviewed. The person who conducted the study is not an epidemiologist. He is a sports physician. Okay. And not that he's not qualified, but there, as is noted in the other article, a number of people who are experts and epidemiologists, you know, talking about the validity of the study. But more importantly, well, okay, I'm going to make one more point just because I have an opportunity to speak tonight and get this off my chest. WIAA. So right now they have tournament series going on for volleyball. And they've already had 14 teams have to forfeit because they had kids quarantined, not able to play their matches. So furthermore, they are struggling finding schools that can host these events. Normally, a place like Monona Grove, we might host a Division 3 or 4 sectional, and so now they're going to these host teams. Well, what most schools who have participated have done is really limited the number of people that can come and watch. Many times it's like 2 adults per athlete, and sometimes just for home only and none for away because they can't manage it in their small gyms. WI is forcing these schools that if they want to host, they must admit 4 adults per every student, home and away, contrary to their what they can safely do. And they're saying, well, then you give up your home court advantage if you're not willing to do this for the sake of revenue. It's just, I'm just so disgusted with them right now. It's unbelievable. So I'm done.
Peter?
Are we doing anything with in the virtual learning with physical education?
Yeah.
Could you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So certainly, first of all, for our coursework in the physical, and that's actually one of the, I don't want to say easier, but they've, I think, done a great job of providing individual workouts for kids and so on. I think K-12, not just, the high school.
Okay.
But
that's K-12, not sports.
Right. We're talking about physical education.
Okay.
Now, as far as sports, actually, Jeff Schreiner has found some models that he's working with the coaches on as well. It's kind of this virtual coaching, of again, providing, part of it is even team building exercises, not just even physical activities. But, just like we talk about in the elementary, the teachers having their morning meetings and connecting with kids, same type thing to try to connect with their athletes. And so that's another thing that Jeff's working on with the coaches is to help, provide those opportunities as well.
And Peter, I can attest to that because I watched my son do it in his FIAD, and I watched my daughter do home ec in my kitchen.
That's excellent. I would.
And my kitchen. So I'm watching.
Yeah, I would reiterate that for the littles too. And so in addition to like normal PE time, they also do like embedded physical movement activities in a lot of their group times as well.
I apologize. I don't have kids in school these days. I've had kids, when I've been on the board for a long time, and I saw them both graduate. But I am a little bit disconnected of what's going on with little kids. So I apologize if I'm asking for things that you already know.
No, it's a great question.
Good question.
And you know what? I think this is a good time. So I've been a proponent of, I think we should be teaching yoga in physical education because it's a lifelong skill that anybody can do for fitness. Now would be a great time to do that. But moving on.
Peter, I got a 14-year-old cooking in my kitchen.
Good.
And so, some of the elementary people are incorporating some yoga type things. I think that's happening.
That's good.
I believe
that's
so.
Also something that's real commonly done on Zoom. So yeah.
It's just a lifelong skill, a skill that somebody could have and use for lifelong fitness. If we taught it to them, got them in the habit of doing it at this age.
All right. Dan, was that it?
Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay. Thanks, Dan, for the report. We'll go to future meeting dates. So we have board workshop. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, if you want me to talk to this, I spoke with Mike Jalka today. So Andrew and I have talked about the idea of we've had, how, as we discussed earlier tonight, in this virtual world, how things have been turned upside down, and even you as board members and making adjustments with policy on things like public comment and so on. And Mike regularly does workshops with boards that he works with as their legal counsel, and we haven't done one for quite some time. And we thought it would be a good idea for you to have an opportunity. Some of you haven't really had a chance to even work with your attorney that represents you, and to be able to go through some of the considerations, some things that will give you an opportunity to perhaps ask questions. He'll have a short presentation, so this is tentative. We need you, to agree that this date would work. But Mike is available next Wednesday for such a workshop.
I think that's fine. I think giving everybody an opportunity at least once a year to sort of have access to the attorney and ask questions and so on is a useful exercise.
I'm gonna have an election hangover, so hopefully I'll be
I was gonna say,
out of.
I look at that date and I was like, oh, is the world gonna be
Hopefully.
functioning on that day? Like, oh, are we living that day? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a lot of coffee,
Might get all
straight
my
black,
electronic
before we get
ballots.
this off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would be able to do that. I have a Madison College thing with going on, it looks like, but that's fine. I'm okay missing it.
Okay. Otherwise, I do have 2 backup dates if you know, as well that he gave me.
Don't do it on my account.
Well, Dan, I think it's critically important as we go forward, particularly as you're working through some really problematic things right now, and we need to be able to support you, that we as a board understand the rules. And I think it's been difficult for the newer board members to attend WSB workshops, and it's been difficult for them to offer the learning workshops. So for instance, when we were doing the research on the policy on public appearances, you know, WSB had 3 or 4 great PowerPoints of programs they've done about board governance, board agendas, how to get your board agenda, what you can do, what the rules are. I think for this board to be able to be respectful and understanding as we go forward, such as a simple motion to suspend the rules, and you were right, it should have been more, you wanted it more specific, that was fine. I think we really, really need this workshop badly. I'm available for that time. I will make myself available, but I think it's really critical that particularly the board members that have been on for shorter periods of time, under the 10 years, and haven't been able to go to the WSB meetings. I think we really need to have this meeting.
Well,
And I really appreciate
I'm
you
a
doing
board member under 10 years, Susan, and I went to WSAB meetings, and quite frankly, I don't find any use. I haven't found very, very little use from those meetings, because the majority of being on the board is such a different skill set than that. So it means nothing to me, and I don't know if you referenced me because I'm under 10 years, so.
So you could sit here and give me all your full understanding of the open records law and opening up a blog for yourself and what the requirements were for being able to do that, and that you're only speaking for yourself. And
all legal. I got it all.
That was all clear and understood, even though it wasn't to the community. Was that clear?
Yep, very clear. Yeah, go ahead and file open records request, or go ahead and file a complaint then if you want to go through the process. That's fine, Susan. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Eric,
the Attorney General's guide was very clear and everybody understood.
Excuse me, Peter, I'm not quite done, and that is an issue you had with us. I'm just trying to help us work together as a team and be collaborative and have good understanding of the issues. And rather than spending 20 minutes, as Susan stated, talking about whether or not we're going to suspend this and how we're going to do it, we would have a better feel for how to go forward.
Well, then don't, I'm speaking for myself, then don't insult me by saying it would be helpful for other board members under 10 years to do this like I don't understand it. I understand it, okay?
I take it back. I totally take it back. I need to be there just like everybody else.
All right, Susan, Fox, and then Elizabeth, and then we're gonna close it out here.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I just think it's helpful if we can all be here so we all hear the same thing and we can all raise the same questions. It's nothing about anybody knowing or not knowing, whatever. That would not be my point. But my point is, if we're gonna have a workshop on governance, I just think it should be at a time when everybody can come. So I guess that's the only point I would make. So I don't know if later that night, Eric, would work for you, or if a different night would be better, or.
I'm busy from 6:30 to 8. It could go to 9, and I'm not going to have another meeting on top of that.
No, that makes sense. No, that would not be appropriate. But so I don't know. I don't know. You mentioned you had a couple of backup dates, Dan. Where
the other 2 dates that he would be available would be next Monday the 2nd, or the following week on Tuesday the 10th of November.
Okay. Any of those work for me, but
both of those work for me.
I have not much going on.
I'm not able to do the Tuesday.
And
So
I don't
what
think
about
I
the
can do
Monday?
Monday is
Monday.
fine for me.
I'm sorry, Monday the 2nd or Tuesday the 10th? Either of those is fine for me.
Elizabeth?
My preference is Monday the 2nd, but I can make the 10th work.
Okay, sounds like the 2nd is gonna work for everybody. Let's do
Not
Monday.
me. I can't do the 2nd.
Oh, I thought you said you could.
No, I said I can't. I said I couldn't. I probably wouldn't be able to do the 2nd. But
So the 2nd and 3rd is out. too.
I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Go ahead. Do it for all the rest of the board members. I'll be fine.
So why don't we go ahead? We
Well,
just
given
stick with
that,
the
yeah,
3rd.
Lorraine can't do the 10th, so then
We'll
maybe.
just stick with the
back to
3rd.
4th. Whatever.
The
So
4th.
we're gonna stay with the 4th.
The
We're just
4th, I
gonna
mean, yeah,
keep the
just
4th.
stick with the 4th.
Okay. All right, I'll confirm that with Mike tomorrow.
Okay. All righty.
Thank you, Andrew and Dan.
Yep.
I mean, I need it, so I'm like, I don't know about anybody else, but I've been here like a very short amount of time in a very bizarre set of circumstances.
It's
and
always
so-
like this.
Right. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah. Oh,
and
you should have been
happy
here.
to take it.
You should have been here when it was To Kill a Mockingbird.
That's
too.
what everyone keeps telling me. Everyone's like, you know, it's like a lot like a pandemic. To Kill a
But you're right,
Mockingbird.
Elizabeth. I needed to.
Me and Eric
Absolutely.
walked in a whole bunch of mess.
I have to say, Elizabeth, this was not as bad as the 2010-11. I think that was the school year budget cuts. It was
But
not as.
those were the worst. Well, they were
Well,
about as bad as this.
You
And
wouldn't-
to be
Not quite
clear,
as bad as almost,
I
yeah.
am very much
That's
enjoying
next
my
year.
time. I don't describe this as bad at all, but I like this is a me issue, right? I'm speaking personally that
Right.
like
Mhm.
it's very clear to me that I like don't know what I'm doing, and some grounding around the rules would be really helpful because our conversations are always so they're in like there's always high stakes issues, I feel like, on every agenda these days. That's all I'm saying.
All right, Lorraine.
I'm in agreement with Elizabeth. I definitely can use the training. Should we come with prepared questions then?
Yeah, definitely. So what I talked to Mike about is he's got a general outline that he uses and he knows, some of the issues that we're dealing with. So the idea is that he'll give a short presentation, but then a lot of time for kind of Q&A, so.
Okay. All right, can I have a motion for adjournment?
No, I want to stay here all night. I move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, roll call. Elizabeth,
Hi.
Peter,
Aye.
Susan Fox,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Lorraine, Susan Manning,
Aye.
Andrew, ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you. Katie, Dan, could you two stay with me? I have a couple of questions I got to ask you too.